Hi, I'm James Connor, and welcome to Inspired by Their Stories, the Pulte Family Charitable Foundation's monthly podcast. Hello, and welcome to our third episode of Inspired by Their Stories. I'm so glad you decided to tune in today. We are recording this episode from our offices in sunny South Florida, although last week, our whole entire foundation team was in Plymouth, Michigan, visiting one of our humanitarian hotels, the St. John's Resort. There we had our staff retreat, and it was so great to spend time with all of my colleagues. We got to tour the resort, including the brand new 17,000 square foot Monarch Ballroom. We also visited the Pope Francis Center, saw St. Anne's Basilica in Southwest Detroit, and hosted all of our Metro Detroit grantees at the resort for a really fun evening. It was such a good trip, but now we are back to business as usual, which brings us to today. And as you know, this podcast is dedicated to telling the stories of changemakers, and that's definitely the first thing that comes to mind when I think about our guest today. Curt and I are roughly the same age, and so he's one of those people that when I talk to him, I feel like a little bit of a slacker, but also inspired to do more. So today we're going to be talking to Curt Bowen, and he is the co-founder and executive director of Semilla Nueva. And let me tell you, Semilla Nueva is doing some really, really innovative things to fight malnutrition, poverty, and climate vulnerability in Guatemala. Curt, I'm so glad you could be here today.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure.
So I want to start with your origin story. I know you grew up in Idaho, so how does one go from Idaho to Guatemala?
Yeah, I think the real root of that story actually is my mom doing a master's degree in Catholic theology. And so like she was homeschooling the three of us, and she would come back with these like crazy ideas about social justice and these stories about priests and nuns and what they had done as part of like the liberation theology movement in Latin America. And it was just this idea that like living the gospel meant going to some of the hardest places, taking on really big challenges, including challenges of injustice and like deep unfairness in the world, and trying to make lives better for people. And so like I grew up with like comic books of like Monsignor Romero and other people. And I think it really, really, really touched me. And I think all of that kind of like lay dormant for a while until I was in college, and my best friend at the time had just got done with a gap year, and he'd spent the year in Central America and became really close with this guy in Nicaragua. And the guy was like 19, same age as my really good friend. He had like a 17-year-old wife, 2-year-old kid, and they had chatted a lot about eventually helping that guy build a house for his family. It's like tiny little piece of land, but he was still living with his parents. The guy's name was Alix. And Joe came to college. He told me all these really cool stories. And then like a month into school, Alix died in a fishing accident. And it left his wife and his son with nothing. And so Joe decided, my really good friend, that he was going to go build a house for that family. Like that house that they'd always talked about, he was going to raise the money, build it, and either the family could live in it or they could rent it out to pay for Fabian, the kid's education. And so right into school, this is what we started working on. And I went down as the summer after my freshman year, and we built that house. Uh, and like we all went down to kind of like help a little bit, but then like things got way more expensive. It was summer 2006. And so we ended up having to do all the labor to build that house ourselves. So we stayed a little bit longer than we thought. We're mixing concrete all summer. It was really fun. And I had this experience that I think a lot of people do, where you're building the house and people start coming up and being like, "Hey, my grandma is dying. She needs like a couple $100 to get surgery, or my family also needs a house." And you just start seeing this need everywhere. And I think some people go to the like, cool, like, how do I meet the need exactly how I see it? And for me, the thing that kind of hit me instead was like, what's at the root of all of this? Like, what is behind all of this poverty? And why have we been doing the same things, like building houses in Central America, where I'll talk to somebody about what I do and they'll be like, oh, yeah, I went down in the 1970s and built houses. And you're like, so we're still doing the same thing. How do we actually fix it? Like, how do we actually make a big difference? Um, And I think I got obsessed with that question. And I think I'm still obsessed with that question. And so we did some more work in undergrad in Central America. We built like a little development NGO. And then I thought I was going to go do another little project right after I graduated. That would take me like 6 months. And I would actually go back to school and get a PhD. And I just stayed. So I moved to Guatemala at 21. And I've been there ever since.
Yeah, so much of your story reminds me a little bit about how the foundation approaches our giving. We believe that you have to provide sustenance for today, but also look at transformation for tomorrow. And so it seems like that is kind of ingrained, that thinking about things systematically is really ingrained in how you approach things.
Yeah, no, I think, I always feel like I'm a kind of a weird hybrid where like my dad worked in like tech entrepreneurship and my mom was like, the social justice. And I feel like I got like my mom's heart in my dad's head. Although in some ways it's kind of the reverse. It's actually the opposite. But yeah, like how do we think about big scalable things that can change systems to the end of making the world a fundamentally more just and kind place?
So when you decided to make the move to Guatemala, was it just you by yourself? Did you have a support network kind of already in place there?
So I had a guy who we'd worked with in some of the projects in undergrad. Uh, and so he and I kind of were the start. And then a couple of my friends from undergrad and from some of the projects we did came down. So we had a pretty good group pretty quick. And I think that was a big advantage, right? Like when you're working with like people you really love, it really helps. Especially when you're in like a really hard place where you don't really speak the language. That's super, super foreign. So I had to like learn a lot of Spanish really, really quick. Um,
Yeah, I don't think I'd be up for that. Well, I'm sure I would make do eventually and learn the language, but I'm sure that was quite a challenge at the beginning. Um, you mentioned your parents. What did your parents say about your move? I mean, I'm trying to imagine having that conversation with mom and dad at 21, being like, "Here I go. I'm off to Central America."
I mean, yeah, it was super different, right? My dad was just like, "Oh, cool." I was like, "Yeah, dad, I want to try this thing. It could like to be a total bust, but and he was just like, "I mean, you're at the right age." He'd done a lot of startup stuff when he had 3 kids. That's really hard. He was like, "You have no responsibilities. Like, just go for it. Try it. What's the worst that can happen? You can lose a couple years of time, but you'll learn a lot." And I think my mom was like, "Wait, when are you gonna get a real job? Like, when do I get grandkids?" Like, so she was a little focused on other things. My dad was just like, "Go for it."
Yeah, that's funny. So when you first came to Central America, you talked about having your eyes kind of open to some of these issues. How did malnutrition and this whole idea around se- corn, how did that first take root with you?
Yeah. I mean, I think at the beginning, I was a much more focused on the environment. I think that was kind of one of the big things that a lot of, kids straight out of college in the mid 2000s were focused on. And I think that really quickly started to take a backseat for me as an issue, um, as I realized just what was going on in people's lives. Like it's so interesting how the more that you directly interact with a group of people, the way that you think about issues, the way that you think about priorities changes. And I started really caring about why people were immigrating illegally to the United States. Like what was going on in their lives that when so many people they know had like literally died in the desert on that trip or had their kids raped on the way to the US or but like so many tragic stories, they're still pushing so hard to get to the US. Like what was happening? And that why led to this really, I think, really, really simple explanation, which is for your kids to get ahead in Guatemala, they need to get through high school. Like that's like the next step. If you're a super, super poor farmer, you just want your kids to get through high school. And high school isn't free. They don't have public high school for most people in Guatemala. And so if you want to get your kids through public school, you need to pay like $30 a month. And most people don't make enough on their farms to pay $30 a month per kid. And so that became like my first big thing. It's like, how do we help people make that much? And then as the more that you learn, you realize that even if the kids are in school, if they're super malnourished, if their brains haven't formed, if their bodies haven't formed, uh, they might drop out of school. They might not make it through. And they're going to have a way harder time getting a job. And that malnutrition was at the fifth highest rate in the world in Guatemala, which is super surprising. Like I would think most of sub-Saharan Africa was worse. And there's like way less malnutrition in Kenya, um, than there is in Guatemala at a percent basis, which is fascinating. Um, and so I started to kind of like zero in on these two big questions. Like A, how do we make sure that mothers and small children get the nutrition they need? And B, how do we make sure that farmers are making enough money they can put their kids through school? Because if both of those conditions are met, families stay together. And as somebody who like came from a family that like broke apart, at a point in my childhood, seeing that we have an economic system in Central America that requires the breaking up of families for people to give their kids a better future just breaks my heart. I'm like, that's not how the world should work. So let's fix that. Um, I think that's more or less the story, I guess.
I guess the next question then is, when did Semilla Nueva officially start then?
I think we registered as a 501c3 in like 2010, 2011.
Okay. And what does the name mean for those who might not speak Spanish?
It means new seed, which is fun. Like it started off as a metaphor because we were like about teaching farmers new ideas. We're like, they're little metaphorical seeds. And then as fate would have it, that's actually all we do now is we work in new seeds, like very literally. And we're working on changing the name. And like, I think we're finally have the website launched in English now where it's like New Seed instead of Semilla Nueva to make it a little bit easier. Cause like I have family members that 15 years later still can't remember the name of the organization. So we're going New Seed now. We can call it that going forward.
Okay, great. That's going to take a minute for me to make that change in my brain.
It's taken me 6 months and I'm still not doing it successfully myself. So think you're in good company.
I think a lot of our listeners would agree that it takes a special kind of person to do what you've done, to move to a new country like Guatemala and to dedicate your work to an organization like Semilla Nueva. I'm curious about how you found other people, other like-minded people to join your team. Are they locals from Guatemala or friends from the US or a mix of both?
I mean, I think it's changed a lot as the years have gone by. I mean, when we first started, it was really heavy on idealism. Like when we first started, our idea was like, let's find cool new ways to farm that can help people farm their way out of poverty. And that's like it was very big and broad. And so I think we attracted a whole lot of people who were into something that sounded like exciting and cool and new, even though we didn't really have it worked out. Also, we were paying people like $300 a month. So like, it was like Guatemalan farmers who loved that salary, and it was like kids straight out of college that were like, fine, give me a place to crash and enough money for 10 beers a month, and I'm in, right? So like that was the beginning. And I think slowly we got better at what we were doing. We got a lot more honed. We developed more data. We had a much clearer story. And now, where our idea is like, okay, corn is not a nutritious food. We want to breed corn to be a much better food, get lots of seed companies to make those seeds accessible to farmers, and get governments to take over the programs that make that possible. And we have a lot of data on how well that's working. And, we're getting like peer-reviewed, published impact studies, et cetera. Now I think we could pay like market rate for like very like world's best specialists in the fields that we're working in. And so it was definitely a journey from like the 23-year-olds to like now the PhDs.
Yeah, some humble beginnings, but I mean, with any organization, when you start off, it looks one way, and as you go on, it changes. It has to change over time. I think it would be really helpful to put some of your work in context. Can you give us some of the statistics? What does poverty and malnutrition look like in Guatemala?
Yeah, so it's a country of 18 million people. Uh, the vast majority eat corn 3 times a day. We're talking about over a pound of corn. Nearly half of the kids are chronically malnourished, which means that they're really short for their age. That leads Guatemala to have the shortest women and the second shortest men on the planet. So especially if you go to some of the rural areas, there's like people who are like, 4'6", 4'4", like this is a common height. And it's not genetic. It's because they didn't get enough iron, they didn't get enough zinc, they didn't get enough protein. Um, Average IQ levels are super low, like 70s, low 80s. Education rates are really low. It's normally ranked in one of the 10 worst places to be a woman. Not great. Normally in the top 15 or 20 worst for the impacts of climate change. A quarter of the population grow corn for a living. It's about a million little corn farms dotting the countryside. And the vast majority of those people are living on less than $3 a day. With some as poor as like, $1.50, $1.80 a day. So that's kind of like our baseline. And what we do for that is like, if everybody's eating corn, it's really, really hard to get people to stop eating corn. Let's just breed the corn to be more nutritious. That's kind of like the step one of our model. And we do natural breeding, so it's not GMO. Like we don't really have a problem with ethical use of genetic engineering, but it's not legal in Guatemala. And so we do conventional breeding, lots of like big baby plants and figure out what's the best one. We come up with seeds that are like really high yielding, really resilient to droughts and storms, and also have a complete protein profile, like milk or quinoa, more iron and more zinc. Those are the three most important missing nutrients in the diet. And we just get the corn to have those things. And then we take those really good seeds. Most farmers can't afford really good seeds. Like 85% don't buy seeds every year. Only 5% of farmers buy the really good stuff. And we basically pay seed companies a subsidy if they sell those seeds for a cheap price. So if you're a farmer, you walk into your little store where you'll buy your fertilizer or whatever for your corn. And there'll be a guy at the counter and he'll be like, hey, we had this like new corn seed. And I know you normally don't buy seeds, but like here, this one's super, super good. And it's like cheaper than the cheapest. You should give it a try. And farmers, we're talking like $1 a pound, a little bit more than that. Farmers might spend $5, buy 5 pounds, and then take that home, plant it, see a much higher yield, get tortillas that taste super good, and be like, cool, I'm going to go buy more next year. And as we get that working, we're eventually able to take that to the government and say, hey, look, we're paying a very small subsidy to help farmers' incomes go up a lot. Average farmers increase their income close to $100, and we're spending around $20 on the subsidy. So for $20, you can, get 5 times that much money to a farmer, as well as nourish a whole family, as well as that family will sell enough corn to nourish 30 people. It's like the best deal you can get on a social program. Why don't you guys start paying for this? And right now we have the Guatemalan government paying for about 70% of the subsidy in Guatemala, and we're hoping to get Salvador rolling as well. I think we're with 30,000 farmers feeding close to 1 million people last year. And we'll get, if everything goes well, 60,000 farmers feeding close to 2 million this year between Guatemala and Salvador.
One thing that comes to mind is the process of relationship building with the farmers, building that trust. How did that look? Like, how have you gone about getting the farmers to adopt it? I mean, you gave the example of going into the feeds to the store and working to sell it that way, but have you had to do a lot of trust building or relationship building in that process?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think a lot of nonprofits really focus on that, and they kind of like sell. They're like, I have like 50 farmers that really trust me. And I think that that's good. I think you need to build like a baseline, especially when you're experimenting with new things. But at a certain point, you kind of have to play a different game if you're going to try to get to scale. And so, the reason that farmers trust us now is because when they go to a retailer and they buy the seed, they know that they're going to get a good seed. It's not going to be like some random corn that somebody put in a bag and put our sticker on it, right? Like, and it's going to be high quality. It's going to sprout when they plant it. So you end up switching from kind of this like individual trust building, which is I think what most people are doing at the beginning stages, to much more of like a market based trust building, where people are trusting like the product and the organization that ensures the quality of that product. Um, and that just takes a ton of time. And sometimes you have like seed that has some issues go out, and you spend a bunch of time like trying to get to thousands of farmers to like either replace the product or give them like a coupon for better stuff the next year. Like you're doing corporate level PR to a certain extent, but that's the only way that a team of like 50 people can get to 30,000 farmers and 1 million beneficiaries is trust kind of happening in like a slightly, like almost a more corporate way.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And earlier you had mentioned something about getting some of the larger companies to help you distribute the seed. What does that process look like?
Yeah. So we, once upon a time, we thought we were going to like sell the seed and make enough money selling the seed that we could be financially sustainable. We're really excited about that idea. Turned out there was no way to make money at the thing and sell the seed at a price that the poorest farmers could afford. And so we went from like a classic social business methodology to more of a system as change methodology, in which we were like, okay, let's get all the seed companies on our side. Let's just find all the people who want to sell seed, who are selling seed, and say, hey, why would you not sell this nutritious seed instead of your normal stuff? And they'll normally say like, people don't care about it. They don't want to buy it. There's no demand. Like I'm not going to easily make money. And so we asked them like, okay, what price would you have to sell this super nutritious seed at to get tons of farmers to buy it and for you to make money? And they'll be like, well, I can't do both. Like I can either sell it super cheap or I can make money. We're like, cool. So if we paid you a subsidy, if we paid that difference, what would it look like? And the rough math is the amount of seed that a normal farmer buys, like that needs to cost $20. It needs to be like about $20 for 20 pounds of seed. And the seed company needs to sell it at 20, and then we need to pay them another 20 to make them profitable. That's the equation. And so we work with all of these different seed companies. We're with the majority of Guatemala seed companies now, and we're getting to a good chunk of El Salvador seed companies. They try producing the seed. We support them in that. We do trainings, and then we pay for results. So the amount they sell at the right price, we write them a check at the end of the year. And that's the overall strategy.
As you've gone about this work, how have you seen the needle moving? How do you tell what success looks like? What are the sorts of metrics that you are measuring?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so the end goal, right, is a ton of nutritious seed, like a ton of nutritious corn gets harvested on farms, gets eaten by those farmers, gets sold into the market where it's eaten by other people. That's the big goal. Like at the end of the day, it's like what percentage of all of Guatemala's corn is super nutritious, and what can we predict is going to happen to people's lives as a result? And so we have like a bunch of like really fun statistics that like run the model, and it's basically like, for every uh if we can get to like half the corn being nutritious, we could like drop stunting by like 10 points, which is like over $1 billion of extra income and health benefits for all the people who are eating it. So that's kind of like our baseline. That's our big goal. That's where we want to get. I think this year we'll probably get to like 5 or 6% of the corn. And so we have kind of like, equations for how much corn equals how much benefit, which is fun. But we have to measure that. So, working backwards, first step is like we survey a ton of the farmers who grew our corn, and we're like, how much did you eat? How much did you sell? And we can pretty quickly figure out like what percentage of Guatemala's corn is biofortified based on that. Then the next big question is like, how much more money are farmers making? Actually, no, there's one more, which is the corn actually more nutritious? So we like go to all the farms and we harvest a chunk of their normal corn and we harvest a chunk of the biofortified corn and we send it to our lab, and we'll send it to a third party lab too. And we'll evaluate it for protein and iron and zinc. We have a lot of studies we've done with partners showing like, do kids that are eating this get healthier? Do their bodies absorb the nutrition? So that's kind of like the nutrition angle populationally and then family wise. We'll also find farmers who planted our seed and planted their normal seed and like managed them in the same way, and we'll harvest both. So we'll be like, okay, on your normal plot, you spent this much money to grow your corn, you got this much profit. And with our seed, you spent this much and you got this much profit. We're finding that farmers on average are getting 67% more profit from growing our corn versus their normal corn, which is awesome. Um, and a part of the reason that they're getting more yield is because the corn our seeds are on average more climate resilient. They withstand storms and droughts better than what most farmers are using. And so we'll also look at that, like, how many plants got rotten in a drought? How many plants blew over during a storm? Literally, we're out there counting the plants in farmers' plots to get like real quantitative data. Um, I think those are probably the most important pieces.
Yeah, and so specifically for being more drought resistant, that is something too when you're breeding the seed. That's something that you're looking to increase to help make the seed and make the corn more drought resistant and stand up to some of the effects of climate change. Looking back at everything that's been accomplished at Semilla Nueva or New Seed, what are you most proud of so far? I mean, I know the work's not over.
Oh no, I mean, like, yeah, like if things go well this year, we'll nourish 2 million people, which is awesome. I think our goal is a billion within the next 10 or 11 years. Maybe 15. But yeah, like there's a billion people eating corn. I think we can get to that many people. So we have a long, long ways to go. But I mean, if I really think about what makes me proud, um, I mean, sticking with it for 15 years is kind of a feat in and of itself. But I think their trajectory has always been like we try a thing, it's not what we hoped. And then we try the next thing. And it's this kind of like really open, iterative process of explaining to folks, like, here's our best idea for how we can reach millions of people, help us do it. And then being really, really open with the challenges, as well as the point where we finally throw in the towel with that idea and then take like a modified thing or a new thing and go start it. I mean, we didn't start with more nutritious corn. That's not what we were doing 15 years ago. But we got there. And then we got good at like actually figuring out how to get farmers to use it. And we're starting to get good at getting governments to pay for those programs. Um, so I think the thing that I'm the most proud of is that we were able to stay open and transparent, even when things got really, really hard. Um, and I think that's just like, it's a big piece of our culture now.
Yeah. Uh, Speaking of things being hard and difficult, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up some of the changes in the landscape with U.S. foreign aid and all the cuts to the U.S. AID stuff. Because I know that you all were impacted by that. How can you maybe share with us a little bit about how that impacted your work?
Yeah, I mean, we spent almost a decade trying to work our way into uh, the U.S. government's foreign aid programs. I think our first application was in 2014, you know, and we slowly worked and slowly built until we found this really cool niche where we had U.S. government funding in a way that I was really proud of. So most U.S. government foreign aid program funding has a lot of issues. There are like huge problems. But we were able to be part of this kind of vanguard that was developing a new way of doing foreign aid, which was mainly focused on a type of grant that were pay for results. So you basically are selling the US foreign government impact. Like if we reach 50,000 farmers, you pay us this much money. If this farmers make this much more income, you pay us this money. If we don't, you don't pay us anything. And so it's like way less bureaucratic in that you're not like doing crazy financial reports on every penny that you spend. You have a lot more freedom. It's almost like unrestricted money, but you got to do the thing you said you're going to do. And if you don't, you just don't get paid. I think that's cool. A lot of like the big nonprofits hated it because like there's a chance they wouldn't get paid. And they're like, no, 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 no. But like we thought that's how it should be. And so there was this effort, there was this genuine effort that was backed by both Republicans and Democrats to actually make US foreign aid better. Um, and we got involved enough with that and pushed and like were supported. We had about half our funding was coming from USAID. It's like a big, big expansion, and it had just kicked off in 2024. So, I mean, we'd hired a ton of new people. We were expanding to new countries. Like we were go, go, go time. Um, and even my senator, like Senator Jim Risch, who's the head of Senate Foreign Relations, like did a press release, or he had a committee meeting where he actually like lauded New Seed, Semilla Nueva, for the work we were doing and for like this being the cutting edge of foreign aid. And to go from that to we're simply going to burn the whole thing to the ground, I think was just like a complete moral tragedy. Um, PR and the bad side of politics was more important than compassion. It was more important than building effective things. It was just like, what is going to be the best talking points? Um, and I mean, beyond us, like, I mean, it was really hard. We fired like 11 people within a couple weeks of the president taking office because of these cuts. And we went to emergency funding mode. Like we closed programs. I was just living out of a suitcase for 3.5 months, flying everywhere I could, talking with donors. Pulte was a great organization. You guys came to bat for us, as did a couple others, to get us back on track. It was really, really hard, but like that is nothing. Like what we went through does not matter. It is completely irrelevant compared to what was happening in Africa, where the freezing of funding um, for stuff like antiretrovirals, like a program, PEPFAR, which George Bush had started under the guise of like compassionate conservatism. So like enough stuff got broken and didn't get fixed for long enough that the current estimates are that at least 300,000 additional people are going to die than would have otherwise. And that's just to date. Like the programs are still pretty broken. And so it's to me, it's unconscionable. Like it's impossible to find a way to put the right spin on that other than just this is a huge, completely preventable human tragedy that borders on cruelty. And I think especially those of us who come from faith need to work really hard to make sure that the party that supposedly represents faith is held accountable for that. Because that's just not how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, where do you think we'll go forward from here? I mean, as you said, there's still a lot of things that are broken, and I know there's still a lot of good people on the ground running their programs, doing what they can to make things happen in the meantime. But where do we go from here? Yeah, from where you sit.
I mean, I think that there's a chance now, I think, for cooler heads to prevail. Right. There's some awesome committee staff working on the Hill, in places like, Jim Rish's office, Lindsey Graham's office. Like there's some really good folks who are really trying to figure out what the next iteration of US foreign aid could be. And I think there's a lot of folks in the faith community that are pushing in really good ways to be like, this is who we are. This is what it means to be an American, is to care for the least fortunate. And so my hope is we can get back to some bipartisan efforts to, sure, spend a lot less money, but spend it in really, really effective ways. I mean, I think I'm definitely an Idahoan at heart, right? And all I want is to be like, let's do the right thing and like not waste a bunch of money in the process. And I think there was a lot of waste, and so we need to work on that. And we just have to be really rigorous about, okay, like what is the most evidence-backed way of doing this? What are the programs we know are going to have the biggest impacts? How do we push other governments to actually pay their fair share? These are all really good things. And so my hope is as this gets out of the news cycle, we can get back to kind of like just doing the work.
Yeah, I think all those questions that you just raised there. I mean, I think they're all things that everyday people would agree with, right? Like money is a scarce resource. So how do we spend it in the wisest way, impacting the most amount of people, and doing it in a way that's not onerous for either the organizations doing the work, or for the maybe making the bureaucracy work in a way that's most effective. So yeah, and we'll see what happens. I mean, as people faithful, we can really do is pray and do our part too, right? And do our
Yeah, okay. If we're going to say all we can do is pray, I was gonna be like, no, no, no,
no, no, good catch. We're talking about kind of where New Seed is going from this point in terms of expanding to El Salvador. You're talking about El Salvador, or talking about the needs in Africa. And, what do what's kind of on the immediate horizon for New Seed?
Yeah, I mean, so we've had a lot of people who've like really stepped in uh, over the past couple of months. I mean, like Pulte was a really good example of that, and there's been quite a few others. And so we're kind of like back pushing it again, which is awesome. Um, Expanding the model in Salvador and Honduras. We're still looking for a little bit of funding to really take advantage of the opportunities that we have there. But I think in all three countries in Central America, the question is like, how fast can we go? How do we get to the most amount of farmers as quickly as possible with even better seeds, and get the governments to start taking it over so that we can then go use those resources and do what I think is the big future for us, which is Africa. Um, so as I mentioned, like, I think we're hoping Central America will be like 60,000 farmers this year. I really want to see if we can push hard and get to like over 100,000 the following, and keep up with that kind of like, 50,000, 60,000 new farmers a year. Um, that kind of rate of growth. And at the same time, we're working on some really cool technology and partnerships that'll make Africa really easy, or at least doable. So one of the things I'm super excited about is gene editing. So CRISPR is like one of the most important technologies humans have ever come up with. And if you don't know what it is, it's like basically the ability to find an exact location in DNA and make an exact change. It's like hypersurgical. And so you can use that to make GMOs, where you like take a chunk of DNA from a different species and stick it in a species, or you can use it to make seeds or whatever that's not GMO. That's just like, you know, taking a gene that's in corn already and like turning it on in another corn plant, which is a really cool gray space, right? That means in a lot of countries are passing legislation and regulations that if you're using CRISPR or gene editing to create a new seed that could have been created in nature, right? Like it's something that could have naturally happened, then we're not going to count that as GMO. Like, go be happy. And that is really cool for us because it means we can go to a place like Africa, go to like, Kenya or Nigeria, find the very best seeds farmers already love, use gene editing to just turn on those genes, right? And have like a new, super nutritious version of a seed that is like already the best of the best. And that's awesome because like, especially in like eastern parts of sub-Saharan Africa, there's tons of NGOs that are already working with millions of farmers. There's government programs that are already reaching millions of farmers with new corn seeds. And so if we can just have a way of just piggybacking on what they're already doing and just being like, let's just tweak the seed a little bit. And now it'll have all the protein and iron and zinc that people need. And now it's going to get to tens of millions of consumers. And it basically is, essentially it's free to do that. Super, super cheap. That's a really cool way to have that path towards like a billion people. So that's where we want to go. And I think what's interesting about how we want to do it is we want to develop the technology and essentially make it open. Like if anyone is going to use this to do good, there you go. You have access. Go for it. And so we're getting ready to make a huge investment, like close to $1 million in CRISPR research. Which of course, if anyone listening to this like wants to get on something that could like help a billion people, like it's a fun little opportunity. Yeah. So I think that's the stuff I'm super excited about. There's also a lot of impact studies, right? Like we're getting way better at understanding how nutrition helps the poorest of the poor. Like I'm sitting here like drinking like some kombucha, like the good like older 30 like millennial that I am, and we're starting to do studies now where we're like looking at how nutritious corn actually improves the microbiome of really poor women and children in a drought affected part of Central America. Like starting to learn how the stuff that like, James, like you and I might be like, oh, this is super cool. Let's do this for our family. How we can have interventions that do that, but for like tens of millions of the poorest of the poor just gets me super jazzed. Um, and it's like doing it, but also studying it to make sure that like we're actually doing it right. It's actually working. It's actually helping people. So I think those are probably the two things on my mind right now.
Yeah, that's really exciting, and especially I just love the idea, like I was saying earlier, money is a scarce resource, and so how can you gathering the data, doing the research, getting those insights is really one of the best ways to make sure that you're having the biggest return that you can and to impact the most people. Uh, that's really exciting stuff.
Yeah, dude. Well, and let me fill one more piece because I just like, yeah, I'm getting really excited right now. But I mean, I think the future can be kind of scary, right? Like we look at AI and you read like any of those books by like Harari, like, Homo Deus or Sapiens or whatever, and you're like, oh man, this doesn't seem good at all. Um, we're developing technology to change life and AI that can like understand us sometimes better than we understand ourselves. Like scary stuff. And one of the questions that comes out from praxis, right, that I love, and Dave Blanchard is always asking this question at like every event, is like, what is the role of Christians in our time? What are we supposed to do? And if you go back in history, you can find these moments where like history went a totally different direction because people of faith took society in a different direction. Like slavery was a norm for a long time, and then a bunch of like weird Christians in England were like, "Hey, this is not actually cool." And they were able to convince people that if they wanted to be in line with their faith, they needed to stop having slaves. That's where that whole movement came from. Like it's super fascinating. It's super super cool. And so what is the role of Christians in the world of AI and biotechnology and crazy scary corporations and blah blah blah? And I think one of the things that I'm excited about is like, is it redemptive? Is it like a Christ-like act to say, develop some really incredible technology and then just make it open? Like, make it a gift. Is that, you're wearing a little WWJD bracelet, right? Is that it? And I think that there's a piece that the answer is yes, right? I mean, I'm calling you right now from Silicon Valley. Like I'm talking to lots of people here. We're trying to gain supporters. People here would think it's crazy to develop something that could be monetizable and not monetize. And I guess my question is like, at what level is that like the drasticness of you doing that directly proportional to the level of like a crazy Christian message that can really resonate with people? And so I'm fascinated by that space. Although I don't have the answer at all. I'm just really intrigued.
Yeah, honestly, it's something that I haven't thought about before, but it is such an interesting nexus where faith meets technology. I mean, and what are we called to do as individuals? What are we called to do as organizations working in this like in philanthropic space in this nonprofit and social service space? It's really an interesting question. I think we're just gonna have to live through it and muddle through together.
Yeah. Yeah, community, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we were talking about how you're in Silicon Valley getting getting new supporters and you're talking to us. Uh, if our listeners at home want to be more engaged with New Seed, what is the best way for folks to get involved? How do they get in touch with you? What sort of ways can people support you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we put out a newsletter. It's very uh we're not super prodigious. We're not publishing all the time, so like you're not going to get spammed. But if you like, go to newseed.org or semianueva.org and sign up for the newsletter, that's a really good way to stay in touch. Um, I post a bit on LinkedIn. It's like my only social media that's left now. So like you can just look me up on LinkedIn. It's just Curt Bowen. Um, Find me pretty easy. Yeah, and I mean, I think in terms of getting involved, we're always looking for partnerships. We're always looking for folks that wanna support us financially, and some of the biggest and most important moments have always been, like, a friend is just like, "Hey, here's the scientist you should talk to." I mean, I think a ton of our best staff, some of our best ideas have just come from people being like shooting an email and being like, "Hey, uh, you might wanna meet X person," and it changes the whole history of the organization.
Yeah, that's so true. I've seen it happen time and time and time again. So,
Yeah.
well, Kurt, thank you so much for being with me today and sharing a little bit about your own story and about what's going on at New Seed. All good things ahead, and thank you for being with me.
Yeah. No, I've really appreciated it, James. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to just, do the thing that apparently all guys wanna do, where we just, like, talk about our things in a podcast.
Yeah, we're definitely those older millennials on a podcast.
Exactly, exactly.
Kurt, it has been so good to catch up with you. Thank you for being so willing to share about your own journey and about all the good things that Semilla Nueva or New Seed is doing. Thanks for being here. And thank you all at home for tuning in. We are so grateful for our friends at Semilla Nueva for the work that they're doing in Guatemala. And conversations like this always leave me a little humbled and looking for ways that I can improve my own little corner of the world. I hope you feel that way too. On our next episode of Inspired by Their Stories, we are going camping. And what I mean by that is that we will be talking with our friends at St. Vincent de Paul in Detroit about Camp Hosanum. Each year, hundreds of children from Detroit and the surrounding area have the opportunity to attend an overnight summer camp on the shores of Lake Huron. It will be a fun conversation as we talk about how programs like this help give kids valuable life skills, including leadership, self-confidence, independence, and much more. That's a wrap on this episode of Inspired by Their Stories from the Pulte Family Charitable Foundation. If you're feeling inspired, please share this episode with a friend. Until next time, be good to each other and inspire others to do the same.